A three-time Olympic canoeist is currently in federal custody for allegedly attempting to sabotage a concrete pool that was already destroying itself with green algae. Lambert Willingham is here with the Ripcorp Daily Digest for Sunday, June 21st, 2026. Today we trace the ecological realities of a thirsty Texas, the physical limits of the digital cloud, and a rather untidy transition of power in London. We begin in central Texas, where a few heavy rainstorms have managed to perform a highly successful optical illusion. Visitors have returned to the Hill of Life Dam along Barton Creek, finding flowing water and temporary relief from the early summer heat. However, water management experts warn that the region still faces a cumulative drought deficit of up to 50 inches. Groundwater levels remain critically low, meaning the conservation restrictions will remain in place, and the water you see is mostly just passing through on its way to becoming dry air. The local water supply is essentially a bank account that has been overdrawn for 3 years, and a single weekend deposit does not cover the outstanding fees. This structural deficit has not stopped developers from planning to add thousands of new faucets to the regional plumbing system. In the Hill Country, a proposed 500-home subdivision in Kerrville is facing intense resistance from local residents who are concerned that the project will completely drain their municipal aquifers. Meanwhile, on the eastern edge of Austin, environmental advocates are fighting another massive development project on the grounds that the existing infrastructure cannot support it. The plan appears to depend on the local water supply being entirely fictional. While the long-term forecast remains dry, the official start of the summer solstice arrived with a brief and violent tantrum from the sky. Severe thunderstorms tore through San Antonio and Austin, causing flash flooding and leaving thousands of residents without electricity. Emergency services in the San Antonio area had to perform multiple high water rescues for motorists who mistook flooded roadways for navigable streets. Crews from CPS Energy worked through the night to restore power, proving once again that in Texas, the grid is always just one bad afternoon away from becoming a historical artifact. Those who managed to keep their cars dry during the storms were rewarded with the standard municipal punishment of driving on Interstate 35. The Texas Department of Transportation is proceeding with its multi-month expansion project, which has reduced major sections of the highway to a single high-friction lane. The merging areas on the upper deck have become particularly hostile, with drivers reporting gridlock lasting well over an hour during off-peak periods. Local police have noted an increase in erratic driving and highway disputes, suggesting that the highway department is testing the absolute limits of human psychological endurance. This is not so much a transit corridor as it is a permanent construction exhibit with daily victims. The global logistics network is currently experiencing a larger, more expensive version of the Interstate 35 merge. In the Middle East, a recently signed memorandum of understanding between the United States and Iran has failed to restore confidence in the Strait of Hormuz. The Pentagon maintains that commercial shipping is proceeding normally, but the military command in Tehran has declared the waterway closed until the United States halts military action in southern Lebanon. Ship owners are refusing to risk their vessels in the strait, which has kept transit volume far below historical averages. President Trump has added to the diplomatic complexity by announcing that the United States may impose unilateral tolls on all ships using the strait if a permanent peace deal is not reached within 60 days. This suggests a foreign policy that treats international shipping lanes like a turnpike in New Jersey. While global trade routes remain blocked, the technology sector is discovering that its highly advanced digital future is entirely dependent on very old-fashioned physical labor. Technology conglomerates have committed hundreds of billions of dollars to construct massive data centers to power artificial intelligence software. However, the expansion is running directly into a severe shortage of skilled trade workers, specifically electricians, plumbers, and specialized cooling engineers. NVIDIA Chief Executive Officer Jensen Huang recently noted that hundreds of thousands of physical craft workers are required to keep the digital cloud from overheating. The physical reality of the virtual world has also created local friction in Virginia, where residents of a region known as Data Center Alley are organizing against the constant noise of backup generators. At the same time, employees of Amazon have alleged corporate intimidation after they testified at local zoning hearings regarding the environmental impact of these facilities. It turns out that the most sophisticated artificial intelligence in the world can still be defeated by an unresolved zoning dispute and a lack of copper wire. For the average American, the cost of keeping a roof over one's head is becoming nearly as prohibitive as building a data center. Data published by the Wall Street Journal indicates that the financial wisdom of buying a house has completely broken down. Beyond the burden of high mortgage interest rates, homeowners are being squeezed by sharp increases in property taxes, home insurance premiums, and basic maintenance costs, with the Federal Reserve indicating that interest rates must remain elevated to control persistent inflation. The traditional path to middle-class wealth has been replaced by a very expensive monthly subscription to a house you will never fully own. This would be much easier to dismiss if it were not also the central economic promise of the country. As traditional financial assets become less reliable, many retail investors have turned to betting on the future instead of investing in it. Regulated prediction platforms such as Kalshi and Polymarket are experiencing record-breaking transaction volumes as users wager millions of dollars on political elections and global events. This rapid growth has provoked an aggressive legal response from the CME Group, the legacy financial exchange, which has filed a lawsuit against the Commodity Futures Trading Commission over its approval of crypto perpetual contract. The exchange argues that these new financial instruments threaten retail consumer safety, though market participants note that the lawsuit is primarily aimed at protecting the highly profitable monopoly of traditional futures contracts. Meanwhile, public health advocates are warning that these platforms are normalizing gambling by integrating it into everyday political discourse, turning global instability into a spectator sport with a digital checkout. The concern is that when everything is a market, the only people who lose are the ones who thought some things were still real. We turn to the international political theatre, where the British government is preparing for another changing of the guard. In London, senior figures within the Labour Party report that Prime Minister Keir Starmer is expected to announce a formal timetable for his resignation as early as Monday. This decision follows a severe by-election defeat in Makerfield, where the Mayor of Greater Manchester, Andy Burnham, secured a decisive victory. The Prime Minister has spent months attempting to manage the political fallout from a series of internal vetting scandals, as well as persistent questions regarding the historical relationship between Peter Mandelson and Jeffrey Epstein. With over half of his parliamentary party reportedly backing the Mayor of Greater Manchester, the Prime Minister appears to have chosen an orderly exit over an inevitable push down the stairs of number 10 Downing Street. In Washington, the executive branch is dealing with its own administrative embarrassments, specifically regarding the Lincoln Memorial reflecting pool. The Trump administration recently completed a hasty $14 million renovation of the historic landmark, declaring that the water was completely clear. Within days, however, a massive green algae bloom coated the basin, causing the newly applied American flag blue sealant to peel away from the concrete floor. Rather than blaming the hasty application of cheap paint, President Trump has claimed the incident is the result of a coordinated campaign of sabotage by his political opponents. United States Park Police have arrested several individuals, including a 3-time Olympic canoeist, while National Guard troops have been stationed around the pool to protect the green sludge from further intervention. Park Service engineers estimate that the pool must be completely drained and resurfaced, meaning the $14 million was essentially spent on a very temporary watercolor painting. South of the border, the nation of Colombia is preparing for a highly volatile presidential runoff election that will determine its economic alignment. The race features Ivan Cepeda, a left-wing politician representing the socialist coalition of outgoing President Gustavo Petro, and Abelardo de la Espriella, a right-wing populist lawyer known to his supporters as El Tigre. De la Espriella has modelled his campaign on the authoritarian security policies of El Salvador, promising to dismantle drug cartels and drastically reduce the size of the state. The contest has become a proxy for broader geopolitical interests, with President Trump issuing a full endorsement of El Tigre, praising his strength and promising a revived partnership with Washington. The electorate must now decide whether they prefer a state that promises to feed them or a state that promises to arrest everyone else. The influence of the Trump family is also generating significant friction in Eastern Europe. For several consecutive weeks, tens of thousands of people have marched through the streets of Albania to protest a luxury resort project funded by Jared Kushner's private equity firm. The development is slated for a highly protected coastal area, prompting fierce resistance from environmental organizations and local residents who have adopted the slogan that Albania is not for sale. Proponents of the resort argue it will bring needed tourism capital to the Balkan nation, but the scale of the public demonstrations suggests that building a private paradise on a nature reserve may require more political currency than the developers possess. For today's Discovery Pick, we must look past the geopolitical drama in London and Washington and return to the quiet shortage of blue-collar labor in the technology sector. It is easy to focus on the billions of dollars being poured into artificial intelligence software, but those algorithms cannot function without a physical connection to a power grid. The shortage of electricians, plumbers and cooling technicians is not a temporary hiring challenge. It is a fundamental limit on the expansion of the digital economy. If the technology sector cannot recruit enough individuals who understand how to run high voltage wiring through a concrete floor, the development of artificial intelligence will stall, regardless of how much capital is thrown at it. This story matters because it proves that the most advanced virtual systems are ultimately hostage to the physical reality of human labor, a fact that Silicon Valley is discovering with visible reluctance. It is comforting to believe that the future is being written by software engineers in California, when in reality it is being held up by a lack of copper wire and an unresolved sewer connection in Virginia. Lambert Willingham is signing off. Keep your eyes on the road, and if you are driving on Interstate 35, try not to think about the 50 inches of water we do not have. Until tomorrow.